if you fail the medical entrance exam, that footballers in the English Premier League has this device which they wear when they are practicing.
Who knows? We are also working on aliens.
Can a person from IT background be a part of biotechnology?
Huge amount of proteomics, metabolomics, and genomics data is coming out.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Pine Talks, where we empower futures by inspiring knowledge and guiding values. Our today's guest is Dr. Debojyoti Dhar, who's the co-founder and director of Leucine Rich Bio Private Limited, which is South Asia's first microbiome company. Dr. Debojyoti Dhar has over 15 years of experience in metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and gut health. And apart from that, Dr. Debojyoti Dhar has also co-authored a book called I-Microbiome and has won numerous awards, including the National Startup Award by Government of India. So, Dr. Debojyoti Dhar, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us for this discussion. Can you please introduce yourself? I'm sure that whatever I said will not be enough.
Thank you. Thank you, Pratik, for having me on this very interesting podcast. Yes, you have introduced me absolutely well. Basically, I am a scientist turned entrepreneur. I have done my PhD from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and postdoctoral experience with UMass Medical School in US, Massachusetts. Thereafter, I came back to India in 2010, and I joined a company called Connectious Life Sciences, where I was working as a senior scientist, and we were working on type 2 diabetes and other metabolic diseases. During that period, I met my other co-founders of Leucine Rich Bio, Mr. Prabhat and Mr. Kumar Sankaran. And at that point of time, we didn't we realized that we would start this company. We went our own ways. So I moved on. I did some pharma consultancy. Then I was part of a genomics company in Bangalore. But in this whole process, the best thing that happened was I was part of various parts of an organization. For example, I was an R&D scientist. Before that, an academician. Then I looked into pharma consultancy. Then I looked into corporate communications and business development. So all of this put together helped me to understand how to run a business of your own. And that's how we got together again in 2014, and we started this company called Leucine Rich Bio, which is South Asia's first microbiome company. And just for the audience, what is microbiome?
Yes.
Basically, microbiome is the sum total of the genes of all the microorganisms. So what we are trying to do is look at the microorganisms that reside on and inside our body.
Mhm.
We launched South Asia's first gut microbiome test called Bugspeaks way back in 2016, 2017, when this word was also not known in India. So we kind of created this segment where we look at the gut microbiota. That means the microorganisms which are present in the intestine.
Right.
So that is basically the brief.
Thank you so much for this overview that you have just given about your career and your current development that's going on with your business. I would like to know more that your company is the first in South Asia about who's talking and who's working on microbiomes. What took us so long to start something or realize that this is required? And why do you feel that people have been, or scientists and doctors have been ignorant about this for this long?
Yeah, so a lot of factors, Pratik. The first or the foremost factor is that to start a life science company in India is not that easy.
Mhm.
Unlike a software company where you probably do not need that much of a capital expenditure, a life science company needs a lot of capital expenditure. That is number one. Second is the gestation period. So most of the life science companies need a longer gestation period to turn profitable or to turn into something which is viable. So that's why again that takes away most of the people's interest into it. But it's a high risk, high gain kind of a business. If it clicks, it'll click big. And the third most important, especially with the microbiome part, is that the technology.
Mhm.
So we are using a technology which is called next generation sequencing. So this is the same technology that is used to sequence a human being.
Mhm.
So now, just to give you a context, when scientists started to sequence the human genome, it took close to 13 years and close to $1 billion
Wow.
to sequence one human genome, or rather say human genome. Now, with the advent of this particular technology, which is next generation sequencing, a human genome can be sequenced within hours, and with thousand around $1,000. So that's the power of the technology. So what we are trying to do here is we are using the same technology to sequence the microorganisms or the DNA or the genetic material of the microorganisms. So and that has helped this microbiome domain to leap forward. In fact, in the last 10 years, the number of papers, research articles I'm talking about, on the microbiome has skyrocketed. So this was not there, let's say, 10 years back. So that is, again, one of the reasons why microbiome per se did not figure out in the minds of most of the people. Another very important factor, Pratik, here is that when you're looking at the microorganisms, you are looking at trillions of microorganisms in the body.
Right.
And their interplay with the host, which is human, uh, is quite complicated and complex, right? So they not only interact between themselves, but they're also interacting with the host, right? So it required, this particular domain required an expertise, which which can start from simple understanding biology to computational biology to bioinformatics, and to hardcore coding, for example. So that required a lot of skill sets and the right team to so amalgamate all these together and then bring out something which is really a product for the masses. So our whole endeavor has been that, see, it's a research driven organization, and and it's an ongoing research. It's a new space. It's an like oncology, for example, right?
Mhm.
People are still finding out drugs to treat cancer, but that does not stop scientists or doctors from giving whatever best they have to the patients, because ultimately you have to translate the research, what we call in colloquial terms, from bench to bedside, as as early as possible, with best possible efficacy and less toxicity. So we also wanted to translate the understanding of the microbiome space uh, to the end user to the best of our ability, and that's what we have been trying to do. We have been successful to a large extent, but it's a long journey, and as we move along this podcast, I'll also tell you about what more can be done, or what more we are doing in this particular domain.
Wow, that's very deep. I mean, this is way too much of information for anyone to understand and absorb in the first go. And I'm sure we'll spend time with you talking more about this. Now, you mentioned something about understanding the microbiomes from technical perspective, and because of course I feel that our body is technical in a way, but biologically technical. So, can we say that your company uses the information of microbiology and also takes something from the biotechnology that we have, because students nowadays are mostly confused and they don't understand the difference between biology and biotechnology. Can you shed some light like how biotechnology is a different domain compared to just molecular biology?
So see, these are fancy terms, right? Biotechnology, molecular, these are fancy terms, which ultimately looks at biology in a different perspective. Okay, you can add a pinch of immunology there. You can add a pinch of microbiology, biochemistry. Now, let me try to give some insights on these particular terms. What is molecular biology? Basically, when you are looking at the molecular details of a working of a cell, for example. Now we are made of cells, individual cells, right? That science, or that part of biology, is called molecular biology. So you're looking at how an RNA, it's again a genetic material, or how a DNA transcribes into RNA, then the RNA transcribes into translates into protein, and so on and so forth. So when you're looking at those molecular details, that particular subject is called molecular biology. What is biochemistry? Biochemistry is basically looking at the various chemicals, again at the cellular level, at the systemic level also. And for example, we are made of proteins, we are made of there are a lot of carbohydrates, there are a lot of lipids. So you're basically studying these molecules and their interplay. So that is biochemistry. Microbiology per se is looking at microorganisms, right? How do they grow, what are their classifications? So in the microorganisms we only understand bacteria. That's what has been told to us. For a layman, I'm saying. But it's not just bacteria. You have fungi, you have viruses. COVID was a
Right.
biggest example of how a virus can cause such a big pandemic. So the study of these organisms, which are not visible uh, generally, but only through microscopes, is basically microbiology. So these are basically, these terms are what they try to look at biology from different angles.
Right.
So biochemistry, molecular biology, and microbiology. Now, the role of biotechnology is there in microbiology also. So what is that role? So for example, if I want to change the gene of a particular bacteria, then the role of biotechnology comes in. Okay, so you are basically manipulating the gene of a particular bacteria to make it, let's say, more heat resistant, right? So that is biotechnology. So the technology that you are using to manipulating certain aspects of microbes, etc. Not only microbes, I mean, it can be any cell, for example. That is called biotechnology.
Can a person from IT background or technical background be a part of biotechnology, or what is the career progression or education progression that a student should go through to achieve a level of understanding or level of degree in biotechnology?
So biotechnology would require at least minimum basic understanding of biology. So people with non-biology background will find it a bit tougher if they don't have the knack towards biology. See, what happens is in our schools, when we study different subjects like physics, chemistry, biology, the subjects taught in the school are much more basic. For example, in the school, in biology, a lot of emphasis is given on zoology and botany. Uh, but when you go up the scale or the ladder, let's say in immunology or biochemistry or microbiology, the emphasis on zoology, botany decreases. Okay, because zoology and botany, they are mostly classical biology topics or subjects, and these are new age topics or subjects. So what happens is, when you are studying a lot of zoology and botany in your class, in your school days, um, you need to memorize a lot of stuff. Okay, so that to some people become a bit of a no go, right? uh, but that does not mean that biology is all about memorizing everything, right? Biology actually means a lot of analytical thinking. So that's why I said a lot of, as you mentioned, IT people who are in IT, um, they, because they think that it's a lot of memory and memorization, and in Hindi what we call ratta,
Mhm.
they go away from, even though they might be having very good analytical mind.
Mhm.
So that's why I said a basic minimum biology understanding is important. Nowadays there's a very booming subject called bioinformatics. So in our days when we were young, bioinformatics was not a very big subject, in the sense, uh, the reason, and I'll tell you the reason also. The reason is because of the advent of technology, we are looking at big data.
Mhm.
Okay, huge amount of proteomics, metabolomics, and genomics data is coming out of these different machines. Okay, next generation sequencing, or you can say LCMS and all those kind of machines, they give a lot of data. Now, what is the role of the bioinformatician? The role of the bioinformatician is to understand make sense of this data and convert that into something which is understandable by a biologist.
So there's one more example which I read a few months back, that footballers in the English Premier League has this device which they wear when they're practicing during their practice, which gives information to the coach how many rounds are they doing, what their heartbeat is, what their glucose level is, and their sugar level and water content in their body. Is that something that is
No, again,
bioinformatics?
these are all bioengineered products. So, for example, as you said, I mean, there are so many smart watches now. So when you wear them, you will get to know your sleep pattern, when you slept, whether you had an RA or rapid eye movement sleep, what was your heartbeat, so on and so forth. So what these devices do is they collect these data points and give it to you as a consumer or as a user. Bioinformatician will not have a role here, but when you are collecting lot of data points across different subjects and stuff, then their role comes in. So they need to probably then code something to see a correlation between, let's say, taking a certain food, and its correlation with blood sugar spike at a certain time, and so on and so forth. So, but in general, these devices are bioengineered or engineered devices used for biology.
Coming back to one of the questions, and one of the things that I've observed, that in India we have this mentality that if you fail the medical entrance exam,
Yes.
there isn't much left to do in the medical field.
Hmm.
So, what options do you feel, apart from, of course, something that we discussed? What options do you feel, or what courses that students can pursue, and what is the future of those courses in next 10 to 15 years?
That's, I think, a very good question. So, in our times, at least 20, 30 years back, at least 20 years back also, the options left for a biology student was MBBS.
Mhm.
So, if you don't clear the entrance exam, then you are doomed. That's what the feeling was, because the options were very limited. Now, thanks to a lot of startups coming in the life science biology arena, the job opportunities have gone up. Okay, but that is job opportunity. But what are the different options? So let me try to answer this question. Um, so if a person does not clear MBBS, okay, he or she can go for the new age courses like the biotechnology, microbiology, biochemistry, even bioinformatics. These are the new age courses. Um, Once they clear these courses, there are certain options that they will have. The first or the foremost option is to go for higher studies and research, because all these subjects lead to research avenues being open. And since you are from a background which actually deal with a lot of such subjects, and the universities in the western part of the world, um, research becomes a very uh, uh, nice option for most of these graduates and postgraduates, right? If they don't want to do research, then there are options such as, they can go for medical writing, because once you have that knowledge base, then you can go for medical writing. See, a lot of these new age companies now have reagents and instruments for research, uh, which they give it to researchers, not only in academia but also in the industry. So you need people there to help them understand the working of those machines or the reagents. So that's another opportunity in terms of job, where people can fit in. Then another option that nowadays is really good is patent, IP protection and IP law. So I have a lot of friends and juniors who have done PhD, but now they have moved into patent, because again, for understanding patent, you have to understand biology,
Right.
because now there are so many patents revolving around biology field, especially in India. So that also is a very good field that they can go into. They can work as analyst for various companies, right? especially investment firms, or market research firms, where they would be required to look at, let's say, the trend in microbiome, for example. So an analyst has to understand what is microbiome, what are the trends that is going on, what is the future, and so on and so forth. So that becomes another option. And of course, business development and sales is again a very good option for people who think they can convince the other person, with their knowledge and their skills, presentation skills, into buying some product or services. So now these avenues are open for a biology graduate, which was probably not there 20 years back or 30 years back.
There is one question which I aim to ask each and every guest of mine. So there is this popular TV series and web series called Fuzzy. I mean, most of us in India have seen that. And there was this main character, a female character, who is working with the government, with the Reserve Bank in identifying fake notes. And in the show, her education background was shown as, uh, graduate or postgraduate in printing technology. When I saw that show, I was like shocked and surprised and happy that this is something that people normally don't think of. That after completing something in printing technology, a course in printing technology, they will land a government job in Reserve Bank of India, and identifying fake notes can be one of the jobs. So my question is, what is the most random, profession but completely relevant that you have seen till now, which is like the perfect and you never thought of it that this can also happen?
Yes, I mean, the kind of job that can really, be very surprising, but at the same time very challenging, is a job in, let's say, NASA, where you work with the astronauts. See, the astronauts also do a lot of experiments up there in the space. So there's a division called astrobiology, where people really study biology in space. So that's a very interesting. And in fact, when I was doing my PhD, I used to jokingly say that I'm going to work in NASA, and in the microbiome also. In fact, uh, they have done experiments to show and see the effect of gravity on the intestinal microorganisms when they are in space. So how, lack of gravity um, affects the microorganisms in the space. So those kind of experiments people have done. So those are very interesting. Since you asked this question, an extrapolation of your, where you can, what kind of work you do. Even marine biology, for example, when you go underneath deep sea, in very interesting, I'll tell you, Pratik. Uh, See, we are fighting. The humanity is fighting something called as antimicrobial resistance. Um, uh, uh, so basically, we are fighting against organisms or bacteria, more specifically, which are getting resistant to antibiotics, right? And if we don't win this war, the humanity can get wiped off, because the antibiotics will not work, and your simple infection can lead to death. Okay, but interestingly, the newer antibiotics people are trying to find, they're trying to look at various places, and one of the places is deep sea, and some organism secreting some antibiotic, which can be the real next antibiotic, uh, causing really widespread destruction to the pathogens causing disease to us. So that's what I was saying. I mean, marine biology, astrobiology, these are places or areas where biologists can really work and find very challenging topics to work on. Who knows? We are also working on aliens.
Well, we never know. So, talking about your trip to US and your postdoctorate research, please tell us more about it. How was your experience, and what challenges did you face? Because I'm already working with a few students who are seeking postgraduate research in US and in UK. So I'm sure they'll be happy to know more about everything that you have been through.
So, Pratik, see, when during my period, I'm saying, and this is 2002 when I completed my MSc. At that point of time, there were two options. Like people have right now, they could have that was writing GATE, and going abroad to US. And second option at that point of time was to go to Germany for research, PhD. So many of my friends actually did that. They went to, because going to Germany at that point of time for research was simpler. Now I think things have gotten more difficult, I guess. But going to US for your PhD and all after writing GATE was still quite there in our times also. Now I went to US after I finished my PhD. I went for a postdoctoral research, which is done after you complete your PhD, to get some more experience. So PhD is basically training, and in postdoctoral research, you try to utilize that training in a much more concerted manner. So I went to UMass Medical School in Massachusetts, US. See, I had a few learnings which I would be happy to share, especially for postdoctoral research. See, when you are coming from a country like India to US or going to US from India, um, for further research activities, um, there are certain things that you must look at, which I'm sure a lot of these PhD students already know, but still, in this podcast, I should share. One is that with whom are you going to work? So your PI, or what we call as principal investigator, with whom or in whose lab you're going to work, is very important. If you are going to a new PI or an assistant professor who has just become assistant professor, there are pros and cons. What are the pros? Pros is that because he's a new assistant professor, or let's say um, he's a new PI, he will be much more enthusiastic, and he would really have that urge to do well, because in US, if you don't, you have something called as tenure track, which in India also some of the institutes have, where in your tenure you need to show that you have good research output, otherwise you might be fired. So for those assistant professor, it becomes very important to do good research. And so the pros is that there'll be a lot of pressure. That's the cons. The pros is that it'll be very enthusiastic, driven PI, and a bubbly kind of a place or a space. But the cons is high pressure. So you have to understand whether you want to do that. But more importantly, it is your topic of research. So if I'm going for a particular topic which a particular PI is working on, I would be rather going to him rather than seeing whether he's an assistant professor or the full professor, right? So you should be, because ultimately you are going to spend few years there. So you should be happy doing what you are doing. Otherwise, it will be a lot of problems. So first identify your area where you want to work, and then try identify people whom you want to work with. If you are going to a very big professor's lab or a PI's lab, there's a chance that, and I'm not saying this will happen with everyone, that there's a chance that you might feel lost, because the PI is so busy with his tours and other activities that you might not get that much time. The advantage is that because the PI is big, um, the chances of you working on a bigger, better project is also quite good. And if the results are good, the chances of getting it published in a very good scientific journal is also very high. See, this all happens in academia. I mean, if you are from a big lab, getting a scientific paper published in a bigger journal is easier, as compared to if you are coming from a smaller lab. I'm not saying that it's not possible. Of course, it is possible, but things become a bit easier if you are coming out from a bigger lab. Also, if you are continuing a journey in the academic space, then coming out of a bigger lab helps you get that extra edge when you are applying for those kind of jobs, because people know, okay, so for example, if you're working in a Nobel laureate's lab, so you can always flaunt that and you can say that I worked with him, and people will also know, and then your chances also improve. Of course, you have to prove by
Mhm.
publications and stuff like that. So yeah, so this is basically what I would share with regards to postdoctoral research um, in US, based on my experience where I was.
So, what were the deciding criterias when you decided on a particular university, and did you compare it with other universities?
See, that's a difference when you are looking, when you are going for a graduate program versus undergraduate program, or a PhD or postdoctoral. See, when you are going for a postdoctoral research, then as I said, the criteria is not only university but the work. So you might, I'm using the word might, you might be going to a lesser known university but a bigger known PI
For the research?
for the research, right? So university tag is important, but your PI's tag is also very important, and more importantly, the kind of work you plan to do. So let's say I have an option of going to Stanford, and I have an option of going to, let's say, University of New York. Of course, Stanford is Stanford, and if you go get through it, nothing like it. But let's say if I'm going to a University of New York faculty who is also very well known in the domain where I want to work, probably I'll choose that, because ultimately, during my postdoctoral period, it is important that I publish papers in a good journal, and my, because the PI with whom I'm planning to work with is well known, so probably I'll go there. But again, it's not, there's, I mean, if you get a Stanford or a Harvard, of course, why would someone deny? So see, again, there's also, other things that goes into these decisions. This, especially when you're going to a lab in the US, I would suggest that you talk to some of the past lab members or the current lab members and see how the work pressure is, because you are flying from US, from India to US. You should not land up in a place where, which is not very healthy for your mental well-being. So if you talk to those people, the person might be an excellent BI, but he might be a tormentor in the lab, right? I mean, so I would not recommend going and joining that kind of lab. Of course, people have their own choices. It is my, I mean, my perspective is that I would rather go and work with a PI who has much more human face, rather than a robotic PI who would just go for papers and stuff like that. So 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 those are the minimum things that a person from India, before landing to his favorite lab in US or UK, he should also find out. Nowadays it is much more easy, in our days it was not that easy. Now you have those Facebooks and all those WhatsApps and whatnot, social media. So it becomes easy to get information about the lab where you are going, about the place where you're going to stay. um, Also the pay. So for example, some of the universities will pay you as per their regulations, which might or might not be suitable for your stay, because that place can be very expensive, for example New York.
Mhm.
So you have to then find out whether that the kind of pay that is being offered to you is good enough. It might be high, it might look high, but your stay in a place like New York is also very high. So you will be ending up saving a very less amount. Whereas if you are staying, let's say somewhere in, let's say Amherst, which is a much more easier place to live, then the same amount of pay, if someone is offering, you will be able to save much more. So those are the kind of things which I think, nowadays, of course, um, a lot of people look at before finalizing a particular university, and this is only perspective of a postdoctoral research. But for your undergraduate and other areas, I think there are other criteria.
Brings me to the next question.
Mm.
So that earlier, when we used to do research, when used to find, when we wanted to find something, we used to walk inside the library looking for the books, finding the right books, and finding the books from the same author or from a specific publication. And the research used to be very involved project at that time. You need to be very involved in that. You need to be dedicated, and there has to be certain amount of motivation, self motivated. Now students have access to that information readily available on Google. You can search it, you can find it. How dilute do you think research has become because of this readily accessible information, which is not, or maybe is it used in the right way? Or do you think that reading books and finding information in books was a process or a part of or a ritual of research which added far more inquisitiveness in the students?
Yeah. So no, but to answer your question, Google has made life easier, at the same time difficult also, because there are a lot of information which are junk. So a student nowadays need to filter out junk from the real information. Secondly, how it has made things better is that now with a click you can download lot of research papers on your laptop. You don't have to go to a library and then surf through different shelves to find that paper out. See, 20-30 years back, these papers used to be in physical format. So the print, so suppose if I want to read an article which was published yesterday,
Mhm.
I would have to write an email or a letter to that PI and ask him to send one copy, physical copy. So that will take 10 days to come. Then I will read it. Now, just click and you will download it on your computer and you can read it. See, because of this, the big data revolution has happened, because now you yourself can read so many papers, and with new AI and ML coming in the picture, you can actually utilize that information to bring to some conclusion uh, uh, on a topic that you are interested in. So I think you need to read, and you need to read more nowadays, because of the fact, see, research is also very competitive, right? So let's say if I am working on a particular aspect, there are, let's say, 10 to 20 labs across the world which are working on that same topic. Everyone is doing an experiment, right? Now it's always the first one who wins, because let's say you and I, you being in US and I being in India, we're working on the same topic and we hit upon the same idea. You do the same experiment, I do the same experiment, because no one knows, right? I mean, I do not know whether what experiments you are doing, and you do not know what, but apparently we did the same experiments. Now the person who has access to better reagents, faster reagents, I mean reagents who can come, good quality of reagents and knowledge, will win. So what happens in, in research I have seen, uh, there's a term called as scoop, SCOOP, that many researchers get scooped. Why? Because let's say, again an example, US and India, you get access to the reagents much faster. Okay, so you, and that's again one of my experience in India, and I'm talking about 2002 to 2007 when I was doing research in Institute of Science. ISC is one of the premier institutes in India. Even there, we had to think far ahead of our time for an experiment, because we had to order that reagent. We knew that the reagent will take at least 2 to 3 months to come. Okay, and we had to pray to God that no other individual in any other part of the world would do that same experiment, because if positive or negative result, that no one knows, but let's say if someone does the same experiment and he gets the result, then by the time I get my reagent, that experiment is already published, for example. It published, or people would have seen some results out of it. So when I was in the US, the first thing I noticed is that if you need a reagent for your experiment, you will get it the day after,
Wow.
and it will be on your table.
Wow.
So that's the another reason why now things have changed. Now also now in India, many of these big companies have their own warehouses now in India, and so on and so forth. But during those times, but still we are still I'm sure some of the reagents, if you order even today, it takes time to come. Whereas if you are in the US or in the UK, it reaches you much faster. So that gives you an edge. Uh, um, so where people can actually counter that is by reading. You read more, and see in India, Indians have a good analytical mind. That's why you see a lot of researchers of Indian origin are there in the US. Uh, so if you read more, if you think in a very analytical manner, there's a good chance that you will hit upon some theory which probably someone else would not have thought of.
Mhm.
And then it's your own baby. You get the reagents, do the experiment, and if you are lucky, you will get a good result. Even if you get a negative result, at least you will know that doing this is going to give you a negative result. So that helps. So yeah, so coming back to your point, I think research has not got diluted. It has become much more competitive, and today's researcher therefore has to read much more. See, another thing, Pratik, is that because of accessibility of these research papers, uh, new research is being done and published daily. So you have to really, you know,
You're up to date.
yeah, you have to be up to date, and for that reason you have to read, keep on reading new papers every day, so that suppose you start working on something without reading properly, you might miss out that someone has already done that particular work. So after 1 year 2 years of your work, you will see that, oh, it ho gaya, something like that. So yeah, I don't think it has diluted. It's become more complicated and complex rather, because reading has to be continuous.
So let's move on to the 10 questions
Mhm.
or the rapid fire, whichever way you want to answer them.
Sure.
So the first question is, what has been your most significant professional accomplishment so far?
Oh, starting the company, or rather co-starting this company, I've seen a lot of ups and downs the last 10 years of running this organization along with my co-founders. Um, got a lot of accolades for doing something which is unique, because I think I was the first from my batch, or even before, who charted this way uh, for my career. So yeah, there's no two ways about it that running this organization with my co-founders has been the greatest accomplishment.
And the next question is, who is your favorite author or thought leader in the field of microbiome research?
I'm very bad at remembering names. So and there are so many authors, but since you are there's a author called Dr. John Crean. He's, I think, from Ireland. He's a pioneer in the microbiome domain. So I like his work. Also Sonnenberg, Professor Sonnenberg. So they are really pioneers in microbiome domain. So uh, I would say these two names.
The next question is, can you share a memorable project you have worked on and left a lasting impression, which has left a lasting impression on you?
So we have a gut microbiome test called BugSpeaks. So what it does is it looks at the microbiota profile of an individual non-invasively, and the report that we generate, BugSpeaks report, provides a nutritional recommendation that you should take this food and you should avoid that food, which is based on the gut microbiota profile of that individual. So when we started this journey, um, we have patients or clients with varied diseases and disorders, like from type 2 diabetes to even cancer. So lot of our clients used to come back and say, we are feeling better, especially type 2 diabetic patients and all. So that really, charged us up that here is something that we have created out of nowhere, or which is actually changing lives of so many people. But we wanted to prove it in a clinical trial setting. So we did a painstaking clinical trial uh, where we had 30 type 2 diabetic patients. 15 of them were given Buckspeaks, and they were asked to follow Buckspeak's recommended nutrition, and the other 15 served as control. They were given a dietitian nutritional plan, and then we looked at various parameters. Interestingly, we found that people who were following Buckspeaks, their HbA1c, which is a marker for type 2 diabetes, had come down by 20% as
Wow.
compared to the control. Even the hypertensive parameters like systolic and diastolic pressure parameters had also come down by 14%. And there was also reduction in inflammatory marker. So when this result came to my desk, uh, I was really very happy, because without this kind of result or data, uh, scientific community does not believe, because you cannot say that this person told me that I am feeling better, or that person told me. You have to show, you have to do it in a very clinical setting. So when this data, it actually, of course, writing the paper itself was a challenge. So since you asked this question, I would say that when this data actually got to my desk, and when I started writing paper, it was really a very happy moment. And once it got published in June, it got published in June 2024 in a international scientific journal called PRJ. It was really a good turning point for us.
So tell us a little bit more about the book that you have authored, I-Microbiome.
So I-Microbiome was a project where authors from different walks of life contributed on the topic of microbiome. So there were scientists, there were analysts who work in the domain, and we all wrote different chapters of that book. So the whole idea was to bring our respective knowledge, convert that into a very laymanish language, so that, see, not everyone can understand scientific language or research papers, right? So you have to bring those technical terms and bring it to a level where everyone can read and enjoy. That was the idea. So we collaborated. So there were collaborators from France, from Germany, from US, different, as I said, scientists, and we all contributed different chapters and tried to bring that into a book called I-Microbiome. So that's how this book was conceptualized and published.
So what's your top piece of advice for balancing innovation, ethical consideration, and motivation in your projects or in science overall?
See, one thing I have understood, Pratik, as a scientist, as a pure play scientist, a scientist is never satisfied till he or she gets the full picture. Okay, but when you are into business, then if you keep on waiting for that final answer, you might not see the fruition of your work. For example, see, we are still fighting cancer. We still do not have, let's say, the silver bullet to cure cancer. But if we had waited, let's wait for that silver bullet, millions of people's lives would not have been saved. So whatever we had, when I say we, I'm saying the medical community, the scientific community, we went ahead and started giving it to our patients. Um, so so the thing that I have understood is that, uh, as a scientist turned entrepreneur, you have to strike a balance between waiting for the right product, delivering that product at whatever stage it is to the public, taking into consideration the efficacy and toxicity. I mean, you should be more or less assured of it's non-toxic. Of course, you cannot give anything to people just like that. And whatever best at that point of time you could do, translate that into that product, and try and give it to people and see how it works. And then you start making it better and better and better with more data coming in, with more. That's how any field progresses, actually. But because for scientists, it becomes very difficult, that unless and until you are really on top of your product, you would not want to see it go through. But as an entrepreneur, as in a business angle to it, I feel that you have to strike a balance between that expectation and and getting a product in the market.
Next question is that since you mentioned you have been a scientist and now you're being an entrepreneur, and you just explained how the perspective shifted. Do you think every scientist should develop entrepreneurial sense uh, for better effort and effort versus achievements in a way?
Yeah, that's a good point. See, the problem with at least in India is that even now, Pratik, after 10 years, sometimes my scientific, you know, training overrides my entrepreneurial spirit. See, it's not easy being an entrepreneur. You know that. You yourself is in that domain. Um, an entrepreneur has to look at a lot of things at the same time, whereas in scientist needs to master a particular domain more, and that's the expectation. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, uh, if a scientist wants to become an entrepreneur, there are few prerequisites, I think. One, you should be a good storyteller. Not all scientists are good teachers, right? You might be an excellent scientist, but you might be a worst teacher. um, it is very important that you convey your story to your investors who are going to put money, because if you are rich yourself, it's okay, you can put your own money and start a venture. But if you have an idea and you want to spin off that idea into a company or a product or something, you need to convince your first investor or follow up investors with your kind of work. Second thing is, you should have conviction about your own product, your own self. Because if you are wavering, because in this journey there'll be a lot of places where you will feel that, am I right? Am I doing the right thing? Is this the right thing? And so on and so forth. But if you are convinced about the idea that this is something that is going to work,
Mhm.
no matter how long it takes, then the success is. But if you have an iota of doubt that, okay, what I'm doing is just because everyone is saying entrepreneurship is nice and hence I'm doing entrepreneurship, then there's a problem. So conviction about what you are doing is very important. You have to be very good storyteller, and and you need to present your stuff well. If you have these prerequisites, I think all scientists can become or should become entrepreneurs. And finally, Pratik, one of the reasons why all the co-founders wanted to run an organization was to create jobs
Right.
for people, because we felt that we were limited by number of jobs. I'm happy to say that at least we as an organization provide direct and indirect jobs to close to 100 people. Our own organization has around 20-25, but in the past 10 years we have directly employed a lot of people. Indirectly, a lot of students have come to our organizations for internships and so on and so forth. And because we buy reagents, we need courier service, so all those people are also getting employed because of the kind of work. So that gives a lot of satisfaction. um, you know Creating job, I think, is again one of the very important aspects that we as entrepreneurs should look into. And society now appreciates that, right? Because gone are the days when people were looking for jobs. With entrepreneurship now becoming one of the major fulcrums, I think job creation has become very important.
The next question is, what is the best piece of career advice that you have ever received?
Well, my career is a bit different, Pratik, because I have always taken a jump of faith into various different things. Because see, when I came back from the US, most of my, if not all, of my colleagues at that point of time were looking into academics. So tenure track faculty members, professor, assistant professor, and all those things. So, but at that point of time, I wanted to see how research was being done in the industry. So I took that leap of faith and joined an industry, knowing fully well that it would be very very difficult. because a researcher in an academic setting and a researcher in an industrial setting are two different things. So I did that. When I was there in the lab working as a senior scientist, I wanted to know how the pharma world works, because when you are working in the lab, you are again you might be working for a pharma, but you would not have the full perspective. That's how again I took a leap of faith and joined a pharma consultancy just to understand how consultancy works. From there, I took a leap of faith and started doing business development for a genomics company. Again, so every jump that I took was into an unknown, and no one guided me actually, because it was my own conviction that okay, I have learned this. Let me see what that particular thing can give me. From there, when I was working in that genomics company, I also learned about corporate communications. So on and so forth, right? Um, so I haven't got a mentor as such, a career mentor as such. I have because I did so many different things on my own way. So I think I learned it on my own. Whatever positives, negatives, I've learned it on my own. But I can become a career mentor to a lot of people now.
Definitely. And whatever we spoke about today, I'm sure it's going to help a lot of students who are planning to pursue their future in microbiology and related subjects, especially in biomedical science. So, guys, if you really like this podcast, if you really think that any information that we shared on this podcast, in this interview, in this discussion is helpful for you, and if you feel that you have more questions that can be answered by Dr. Debojyoti Dhar, please write the questions in the comments or call us on our toll free number. That's 1 800 309 PINE. That's 1 800 309 7463. Alternatively, you can scan the QR code and you can just set up an appointment with us. And if you need expert advice like this, please subscribe to our channel and follow us on Instagram. So, Dr. Debojyoti Dhar, thank you so much
Thank you,
for
Pratik.
joining us today. One piece of advice that you would give to the students, from your side, the first step towards being a mentor for the future entrepreneurs and future scientists.
You have to have a cool mind and be patient. Do whatever you do best. Keep doing that, and keep the rest to the Almighty.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Pratik.
And I hope you enjoyed the discussion.
Of course.
And I'm looking forward to having a far more deeper
Sure.
discussion with you in future. So
Sure.
once again, thank you so much.